viewers, these are key messages from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education on the coronavirus. Dear parents, keep children at home at all times. Avoid sending children to shops and markets. Do not engage children in petty trading on the streets and garages. Allow children to play within the confines of the home. Limit visitors into your homes. Adhere to COVID-19 health precautions and guidelines. Schools are closed, but learning continues. Dear teachers, you are encouraged to desist from all forms of group activities involving students. All school premises should remain closed and not to be used for any other purpose. Thank you.
Good day, viewers. I am Adenuga Ajibola, and I'm here today to talk to you or to have a conversation with you about transport system. We are going to look at how materials are moved all around the body. And when we talk about the transport system, we don't mean the transportation which we have outside, in which we have the vehicle going from one place to another, though they are much more related. So how do we define transport system in living organism? Transport system is simply the movement of materials from the parts of the body where they are being obtained, secreted, to where they are being used, stored, or removed, or what we call excreted from the body. I repeat, transport system involves a system which helps to move materials from where they are being produced or obtained to where they are being used, stored, or removed from the body. Now in biology, we look at how materials are being transported. It refers to the act or the means by which molecules or ions are moved across the cell membrane or through the bloodstream. The transport system in plants and animals refers to the movement of metabolic materials from various parts of the organism to where they are being produced or obtained, to parts where they are being either used, stored, or removed. Why do we need transport system? We need transport system to move nutrients and oxygen from one part of the body to another, and we need transport system to remove waste materials from the body. So in living organisms, for every cell of the organism to obtain all essential materials, we need transport system to carry them there, to remove metabolic materials such as carbon dioxide and water and urea. And in plants, transport system is needed to move mineral salts and water from the root to the stem and the leaf, then to move hormones in plants and animals to where they are being, from where they are being produced to the area where they are being needed. Then glucose from leaves are being moved through a process of transportation which we refer to as translocation from the leaf to the area where they are being stored. So how do simple unicellular organisms move materials? They are unicellular, we tend to call them just a single cell, which they have what we call a large surface area to volume ratio. So all their constituents are near to one another in the plasma membrane. So simple diffusion or active transport is being used to move materials through the cell membrane. Unicellular organisms such as amoeba, paramecium, Agglutinin, and chlamydomonas have what we call the large surface area to volume ratio, which helps to move the food, oxygen, water, as well as all other excretory materials around their body through simple diffusion, which is a movement of molecule from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration until the molecules have been evenly dispersed. So now, what happens is that diffusion is effective for small organisms, because when we calculate the surface area to volume ratio, it is very large. But for large organisms like the mammals, the amphibians, the reptiles, which have larger bodies, which makes their surface area to volume ratio very small, because the larger the organism, the smaller the surface area to volume ratio they have. So simple diffusion cannot move those materials. Take, for instance, I breathe in air. When I take in air, it gets to my lungs. Every part of my body needs the constituents of the air which I breathe in, which is oxygen, to synthesize energy. So if simple diffusion is to move this oxygen from my lungs to the tip of my toes, it will take years, because it will move from cell to cell. So this is ineffective to move materials around my body and your body and the body of all other large organisms. So what do we use? We use what we call an effective transport system. We use what we call an effective transport system, which involves the blood, the lymph, to move the body around the body. So, which involves the blood, the lymph, to move materials around the body. So, these materials are in large quantities, so simple diffusion cannot move them. So what are the materials that are transported in animals? They include the vitamins, amino acid, carbon dioxide, oxygen, urea, excess salt, water, sugar, fatty acid and glycerol, mineral salt, hormones, antibodies. We can go on and on talking about so many materials that are being needed to move around the body of an organism. Then in plants, the materials that are needed to be moved around are the manufactured food substances, the excretory materials, the water, the nitrogenous waste, oxygen, amino acid, glucose, lipids, hormones, and mineral salt. A whole lot of them. So we look at the media for transport, or media of transportation. When we talk about media, this is a means through which materials are moved around the body of the large organism. In plants, we have the cytoplasm, which is a fluid of the cell, which helps to move materials around the cell. Then we have the blood, which we are going to talk in details about as we move on. We have the lymph, we have the cell sap, or what we call the latex in the plant. So now looking at the transport system in the plant. Transport system in plants involves what we call vascular tissues, which are encompassed in what we call bundles. These tissues include the phloem and the xylem. Please take note of the spellings. It's called the phloem and the xylem. So what is a xylem? The xylem, what it does is that it helps to transport water and mineral salt. The xylem transports water and mineral salt in the plant. Now looking at the second structure which we have in the plant, we have the phloem. The phloem consists of sieve tubes and what we call companion cells. A sieve tube consists of single column of elongated tiny walled living cells, which we call sieve tube cells. So now looking at the cross walls separating the cells, they are perforated. That is, they have tiny holes in them by minute pores, which we call the sieve plates. The mature sieve tubes do not have vacuoles, they do not have organelles, they do not have nucleus, except a thin layer of cytoplasm. Then substances are transported in the phloem by active transport and simple diffusion. And what are the substances which we are referring to? These substances are the manufactured food substance. And the process through which these materials are moved in the plant is known as translocation. So a companion cell accompanies each sieve tube cell. It is a narrow, thin-walled cell with a ring of cytoplasm and a nucleus. It nourishes the sieve tube cells and transports food across the phloem. Here we have the longitudinal section and the transverse section of a phloem. So the function is that it helps to transport manufactured food. Manufactured food such as the sucrose, the glucose, the amino acid from the leaf to other parts of the plant where they are stored, either the stem or the root. Because in some plants we have the food substances being stored in the stem, like the sugar cane, then in the root like the yam, the cocoa yam. Here we have the vascular bundles of the stem on the screen in front of us. So here we'll take a quick review of what we've talked about before. Looking at this, which process is responsible for the movement of manufactured food? Which process is responsible for the movement of manufactured food? I guess you are going to all get it correctly, because from the previous slide, what we talked about is translocation. Then water is transported through the xylem. True or false? Water is transported through the xylem. True or false? The answer is true, because xylem helps in the transportation of water and mineral salt. Then the phloem transport manufactured food. True or false? And the answer is true, because through translocation, the phloem moves the food substance from the leaf to the root or the stem. Now we look at transpiration, which is another means of movement of materials in the plant. Transpiration is simply the removal of excess water from plant into the atmosphere in form of water vapor. So plants are capable of losing water through three different structures in the plant. We have the stomata, the lenticels, and the corticles of the leaf. The stomata are the tiny pores which we find underneath the leaf. Then we have the lenticels on the stem. Then the corticles is also on the layer of the leaf. So conditions that can affect the rate of transpiration, either to speed it up or to slow it down, are: one, the size of the stomata. Then we have humidity. Then we have temperature, and we have light. Humidity is simply the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. So the importance of transpiration is simply as follows. It helps in the continuous flow of soil water. It helps to facilitate the intake of mineral salt by the plant. Then it also helps to get rid of water absorbed by the root. Then it helps to cool down the plant, because in as much as they are taking up water from the soil and the water is being evaporated, cool water will be absorbed from the soil, cooling down the temperature of the plant. So what mechanism do we have transpiration being used? What happens is that the water molecule continuously evaporates from the surface of the spongy mesophyll cell in the intercellular space. From here, the water vapor will diffuse, because as it evaporates, it diffuses into the atmosphere through the stomata. Then when the plant has lost water, the sap of the mesophyll cell become more concentrated. Then you have what? Osmosis being taking place. Now you now have water moving from a region of high concentration of water to a region of a low concentration of water. That is from a dilute environment to a more concentrated environment. The soil water will be more dilute. The plant cells will be concentrated. Therefore, you have the cell drawing up water. Then the plant gains water. Then the neighboring cells then draw water from the other cells, because the neighboring cell or the adjacent cell will be more concentrated the more they are closer to the interior of the plant, so they tend to take up water. There you have osmosis taking place. Then the water is being drawn into the plant. Then the water will now pass from one cell to the other and is eventually drawn from the xylem into the veins of the plant. So the moving column of water in the xylem vessel extends from the root to the leaves. This column remains unbroken because a strong force, which we call the cohesive force or cohesion between the water molecule, because water molecules have what we call the cohesive force. That is the force of attraction between molecules of the same substance, holding them together, allowing it to be drawn upward in the xylem. Therefore, the water leaves the top end of the xylem and enters the leaf, then it draws the rest of the water column upward. This is the way in which water is moved through the xylem. So now we have the absorption and transportation of water and mineral salts in the plant. Where you have the vacuoles in the roots of the plant normally contain a high concentration of solute than the surrounding solution. The water then enters the root air by osmosis, because it's the movement of water molecules, as I've explained earlier, which results, as a result of this, the vacuoles become less concentrated than the adjacent root cortex cells. Then the water passes into the cell by osmosis. So now we are going to go into transportation in mammals. Transportation in mammals. Looking at transportation in mammals, we have three different components of the transport system in mammals, which are: one, we have the transport medium, which include the blood and the lymph. Then, two, we have a pumping device. A pumping device which involves the heart, which brings about pressure to propel the blood around the body. Then the third one, we have the transport vessels. We have three transport vessels in the mammalian body. We have the veins, we have the artery, and we have the capillary. So here we have the transport vessels, the vein, the artery, and the capillary. So we are going to be taking a look at all this as we discuss further. So we look at the transport medium. What is a transport medium? This is simply a structure which helps to convey materials around the body. So in the body of mammals, we have the blood. The blood is a tissue in fluid form, which flows through vessels and performs a number of functions as they circulate. Now we look at the composition of blood, or what we call the components of blood. This is what the blood is constituted of. We have three components of the blood, or let me just break it down. We have two which are further broken down into bits. We have the solid portion of the blood, which we refer to as a blood corpuscle. The blood corpuscle. The blood corpuscles. And they include the red blood cell, which we call the erythrocytes, the white blood cell, which we call the leukocytes, and we have the thrombocytes. These are the solid portion of the blood. Then we look at the liquid portion of the blood, which we call the plasma. The plasma. So we are going to look at all what this is constituted of. The plasma consists of the dissolved solute substances in the body. We have water in the plasma because it's majorly water. We have dissolved gases. We have the food substance, and we have substances such as hormones. We have enzymes in it. Now looking at the composition of blood, the plasma consists of about 55% of the whole blood composition. Then the blood cell, which we have the red blood cell, the white blood cell, these are the erythrocytes and the leukocytes, consist of about 44% of the blood. Then we have the platelets, which consist of only about 1% of the blood. Now looking at the plasma, we are going to look at the description of the plasma. The plasma is a pale yellow liquid, which consists of mainly water, about 90% of water, and it contains soluble protein, which we refer to as plasma protein. Plasma proteins such as fibrinogen, albumin, globulin, prothrombin, and we have the antibodies like the agglutinin, the lysine, and antitoxins. So, well, let me start blowing your heads with big grammars. So, looking at it, we look at the excretory products which are also in the plasma. Excretory substances such as urea, uric acid, decreatinine, carbon dioxide as bicarbonate ions. Then we have hormones in the blood. So many of hormones which we have looked into. We have the insulin, we have the adrenaline. Depending on the hormone that is released in the body, they all flow in the bloodstream. Then we have food substances, dissolved food substances from digestion, which include the glucose, amino acid, the fats, and the vitamins and minerals. Minerals such as the chloride, the sulfates, the phosphates of calcium, potassium, sodium, then the hydrogen carbonates are all found in the plasma. That's a whole lot dissolved in the plasma. Even the red blood cell, the white blood cell are being conveyed in the plasma. So now we look at the erythrocytes, which is the other corpuscle which we have here. They are circular, or what we call the spherical shaped cells. They are biconcave. What do we mean by biconcave? They have two structures of concave shape which we have here, in which when you look at it from the side, it appears to be somewhat of this manner. So it has two concave sides, so we refer to it as biconcave. It is non-nucleated. It has no nucleus. Why is it non-nucleated? It's as simple as the cell structure, it's being composed of a protein substance which is known as hemoglobin. So if you're being asked, why is erythrocytes non-nucleated? Because the structure is being contained by the the hemoglobin, which makes it not to have a nucleus. So as it's not having a nucleus, it makes it to have a very short lifespan. That means they cannot live for long. They can only last in the body for about 120 days, because as it's not having nucleus, it cannot repair itself. So they get damaged or denatured after about 120 days, and this is being broken down in the liver. So they are elastic. That means they are able to squeeze and stretch through capillaries, because when they are conveying materials around the body, they need to pass through thin-walled capillaries, which are thin. Then the red blood cells are elastic, so they are able to squeeze through. And we have so many of red blood cells in the body. About 5 million red blood cells are in the body. So the erythrocytes are actually produced in the bone marrow. That is the structure in the bone. At the spongy layer of the head of the long bones, we have the bone marrow, which is where we produce a red blood cell, or what we are called the erythrocyte. So because of the hemoglobin present in the erythrocyte, the hemoglobin have what we call a high affinity for oxygen. When we talk about affinity, that is when we talk about affinity, that is the kind of characteristic which makes it to be able to take up oxygen when it comes to a location where we have high oxygen concentration. So I guess viewers, you can guess where we have high oxygen concentration in our body. Definitely it's the lungs, because that is where we inhale air. So we have a lot of oxygen in the lungs. So when the erythrocyte flows to the lungs, it takes up the oxygen and gives out the carbon dioxide. So we get to say erythrocyte transports oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now looking at the other blood corpuscle, we refer to it as a leukocyte. Leukocytes are colorless. They do not contain hemoglobin. They have nucleus. They are fewer in number and larger in size than the erythrocytes. And what they do is that they help to fight against diseases. And they have different ways in which they fight diseases, which we are still going to look at in details. We have two types of leukocytes. They are the lymphocytes and the phagocytes. The lymphocyte produces antibodies, and the phagocyte help in engulfing. They go around the pathogen, take it up, and digest it. That is the way they help to keep our body healthy. Then their lifespan is just about a few days, depending on their action. So looking at the function of the lymphocyte, we said it produces antibodies. So now we are going to look at the different types of antibodies that are being produced by the lymphocyte. Antibodies are chemical substances that are produced to help to fight against pathogens. Pathogens are disease-causing organisms. We have 4 different groups of antibodies, and they are: 1, we have an antitoxin. Antitoxin. As we said, anti means against. So what they do is that they work against toxin. So they are chemical substances. Chemical substance produced to neutralize toxin. Toxins are poisonous to our body. They are chemical substances produced to neutralize toxins. Then we have the agglutinin. Agglutinin. What agglutinin does is simply agglutination. You'll be wondering, what is agglutination? It simply means clumping, the sticking together of the pathogens. The membranes are being stuck together to limit their spreading in the body, therefore reduces the way in which these pathogens affect the body. So we say it sticks the pathogens together, which we can simply call clumping. It clumps the pathogens, or clumping. Then the third group, we have the lysine. What the lysine does is that they bring about lytic action. They break down the membrane of the pathogen, exposing their inner structure, and they become ineffective. So we say it breaks down the outer coat of the pathogen. It breaks down the outer coat of the pathogen. Then the last one, we call them the precipitin. Precipitin. What it simply does is that it precipitates or crystallizes. Crystallizes the toxins. It turns the chemical substances released into the body into crystals. Therefore, they become ineffective. So looking at the other leukocytes, we have the phagocytes. The phagocyte produces what we call, they are produced in the bone marrow. What they do is that they go around the pathogen, they engulf and digest. Just like what? The way in which the amoeba feeds. We call that process phagocytosis. We call the process phagocytosis. So now going forward, we look at the blood platelets, which we refer to as the thrombocytes. The thrombocytes are not true cells. They are cell fragments, tiny bits of cells, as if they are being broken off, shafts of cells. They are membrane-bound fragments of cytoplasm and produced in the bone marrow. What they do is that they help in blood clotting. You'll be wondering, what is blood clotting? Blood clotting is simply the process through which, when we have blood flow, the blood is being stopped from flowing. Therefore, it helps to seal up the wounds of our body. So that is what the thrombocyte does in our body. So we look at the functions of the blood. The blood it acts as a transport medium in carrying materials around the body. So materials such as food substances, hormones, then I don't lost. I know. No, it has to be edited. When the thing didn't just flow out of my head again. Yeah. You know, my problem was this material I'm using, and it's my fault. I didn't prepare myself. It was prepared during the curriculum alignment. I just went through it. So there is a lot of repetition. So when I scroll to the other page, I looked at it. I've talked about it. I've talked about that before. So it tends to make my head saturated in a way. Okay. I guess this man has gone.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
Okay, let this man come. Okay. So now we are going to look at the process of blood clotting.
Can you start again?
Yeah, starting from where I stopped. So we are going to look at the process of blood clotting, which is being done by the thrombocytes. So clotting, as I said, is to prevent the excessive loss of blood. So it seals a wound and stops foreign bodies from entering into the bloodstream. Now looking at the board, we are going to look at how the mechanism is being done, the mechanism of blood clotting. What happens is that when our cell, our body is being cut open and we have blood being exposed, on exposure to air, we have the thrombocytes will break up. When the thrombocyte breaks up, it releases an enzyme, which you know as a thrombokinase, or we also refer to it as thromboplastin. So what the thromboplastin does is that it converts a plasma protein in the blood, which we call the prothrombin, and it turns it to what we know as thrombin. And in the presence of calcium ion in the blood, it then takes place. What happens is that the thrombokinase converts the protein in the blood, which we call the prothrombin, and converts it into normal thrombin, and this takes place in the presence of calcium ion. So what happens is that when the thrombin is released, it then catalyzes. The thrombin is an enzyme which then helps in catalyzing another plasma protein which is in soluble form. We call that plasma protein fibrinogen, and it converts it into an insoluble thread-like structure which we call the fibrin. The fibrin then form a mesh of fibers. It tends to weave up and form a mesh of fiber over the wound. Then it helps in trapping the blood cells, because the blood cells are large. It's just like you have a net covering a surface and you have material trying to force themselves through, so they get trapped in the fiber of the mesh of fiber, and they get to solidify and traps the blood. So as it traps the blood cells, it forms what we call a clot. When it clots, it dries up, then blood flow is stopped. Here we have a summary of that. There we have the damaged tissues and the platelets producing the enzyme thrombokinase. Then, as it produces the thrombokinase catalyzes the inactive thrombin and makes it to be active. It forms what we call the thrombin. So when thrombin is activated, which is an enzyme, it helps in catalyzing the synthesis or the conversion of soluble fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin thread, which forms a mesh to trap the blood cells. That is a breakdown of blood clotting. Now we are going to be looking at the other component of the transport system, which is a pumping device. And in mammals or the human body, we have the heart as a pumping device. It is the organ which helps to move the blood, which creates the pressure to move the blood around the body. Now, as we can see the mammalian heart here, it's a very delicate organ, and what it does is that it helps in circulating the blood around the body. It is made up of a kind of muscle which we call the cardiac muscle. What this muscle does is that it contracts and relaxes, bringing about pressure, and as it's squeezing, it tends to push the blood around the body of the organism. Now the heart is located in the thoracic cavity, that is in the chest cavity, and because of the way in which the heart is delicate, it's found around or just lodged in between the lungs, and the heart itself has a structure which protects it, which we call the pericardium. This part-like structure, which we call the pericardium, secretes a fluid which we refer to as a pericardial fluid. This fluid lubricates the structure of the heart, it moistens it, and it helps it to avoid friction because it undergoes contraction and relaxation. So now looking at the heart of the mammal, it has 4 chambers. As we can see here, we have chamber 1, 2, 3, and 4. These upper chambers, which we have 1 and 2, are referred to as the atrium. But this is singular. For a plural, we refer to it as atria. Then the lower chambers are referred to as what we call the ventricle. They are referred to as the ventricles. And looking at it, we have the left side and we have the right side. And as we can see, the left chamber of the heart are thicker than the wall of the right chambers. And the wall of the atria are not as large or as thick as the wall of the ventricles. Because what the atria just does is that when it receives the blood, it tends to pump or push the blood down into the ventricle, which is a short distance. Then the lower chambers then pump the blood either to the lungs from the right side or to the whole body from the left side. Now looking at the structure of the heart here, it contains structures which we refer to as valves. Here we have a valve. Here we refer to this as a bicuspid valve. And this we refer to as a tricuspid valve. And in between the left and the right chambers, we have a structure which separates the left and the right chambers, which we call the interventricular septum. The function of the septum is that it prevents the deoxygenated blood from the right side coming in contact with the oxygenated blood from the left side. I know you'll be wondering, what is oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood? When the blood is flowing from the whole body into the heart, on entering into the heart structure, it has given off the oxygen in the blood, and it has taken up carbon dioxide, so we refer to that blood as deoxygenated. That is blood with no oxygen. Then, when the blood goes into the lungs, it takes up oxygen because of the presence of the hemoglobin. We refer to that as oxygenated blood. This has oxygen. Then the oxygenated blood has because if we have the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood in a jar, we could actually differentiate them by merely looking at them. Oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood color are different from one another. The oxygenated blood is dark red in color, while oxygenated blood is bright red in color. Bright red in color. These are the differences between oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood. So we look at now the heart, we refer to it as a myogenic organ. When we say myogenic, it means it brings about the impulse needed for contraction on its own. And we refer to that location as the sinoatrial node. The sinoatrial node. Which we refer to as the SEN node. It is found in the right atrium. The sinoatrial node is found in the right atrium, which help to pump the blood around the body. This is about the structure of the heart. So now we look at the blood vessels. We have 3 blood vessels in the body. We have the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. What is an artery? An artery is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart. All vessels that carry blood away from the heart are referred to as arteries. The large arteries that leaves the left side of the heart to the aorta, to the body, is referred to as the aorta. This we have here. We call this the aorta. That's the largest artery in the body. Then this other artery, which takes blood to the lungs, we call the pulmonary artery. Now looking at arteries. Arteries branch again, or they branch off from the largest artery to form smaller vessels, which we refer to as the arterioles. Then the arterioles then further divide to form smaller structures, tiny structures, which we refer to as capillaries. It is through the capillaries that materials have now been diffused into the body. Now looking at capillaries. Capillaries are microscopic blood vessels, very tiny, and they are found in between cells. They have a single cell layer. They have a single cell thickness. So, because of the single cell thickness of the capillaries, materials are able to diffuse easily out of the capillaries and into the capillaries. So, when these materials diffuse in and out and the blood is flowing through, then it goes into its larger structures, which we call the venules. The venules are not capillaries, but they are not as large as the veins. They are vein-like structures, but not as large as the veins. So from there, it starts getting wider and wider. Then we have what we call the veins. We then take the blood back to the heart. Then the circulation continues. So looking at the comparison between the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries, we are going to look at the comparison between the 3 of them, and we look at how they tend to differ from one another. So looking at the arteries carry blood away from the heart, the vein carry blood towards the heart, and the capillaries are the ones that carry blood between the arteries to the veins. They convey blood from the arteries to the veins. Then talking about the pressure in these 3 vessels, the pressure in the arteries are greater than that of the vein and the capillaries. Then the vein has what we call the low pressure. The blood flows with low pressure in the vein. That is why we cannot feel the pulse. That is the pressure of the blood in the vein, but we can feel the pulse in the arteries. Then the capillaries have both high and low pressure. You'll be wondering why we are saying capillaries have high and low pressure. It's simply because when the blood is coming from the arterioles into the capillaries, there you have high pressure. Then when the materials are being diffused out as it's going outward towards the venous, the pressure becomes low. Then we have both high and low pressure in the capillaries. Then looking at the thickness of the wall of these three structures, the arteries are very thick, elastic, muscular walls. The vein have thin, single, slightly muscular walls. Then the capillaries have just very thin, about 1 cell thick. Then the arteries have no valve. The veins have valves, which we have in the heart, where we have the semilunar valve. Then we have no valve in the capillary. That means the capillaries, the vein, and the artery, when we talk about the valve, valves are just structures which prevents the backflow of blood. So because of the high pressure in the artery, the blood flows very fast, thereby they are unable to flow backward. Then in the vein, the blood flows very slowly and the pressure is low, therefore it requires a valve to avoid the backflow of the blood. Then capillaries have no valve too. Then looking at the blood flow in the capillary, in the arteries is very fast and it spots. Then the blood flow in the vein is very slow and smooth. Actually, the blood is so slow that it's only being moved through the contraction and relaxation of the muscle. So the blood don't just move rapidly like that. Now going further, we look at the types of circulatory system. Material circulates in the body, but the way in which they circulate in the body of different organisms differ from one another. Because we've just talked about the components of the transport system. The mammals have this, the amphibians have this, the reptiles have this. But how does this material actually move in their body? Which makes us to look at the types of circulatory system. We have two major types of circulatory system. Please take note of that. We have the open circulatory system and we have the closed circulatory system. When we say something is open, what are we talking about? There's free movement, as we can all relate to. When something is open, or when we say a circulatory system is open, it's a kind of circulatory system in which the transport media, as we all know what is the transport media, it could be the hemolymph, which we find in the body of the insects, the arthropods, or the blood. But here we are referring to the hemolymph in case of what the arthropod, where we have a kind of circulatory system in which the transport media comes in direct contact with the tissues and the organs of the body. They do not move in vessels. The transport media comes out from the heart structure and enters into the body cavities, bathes the tissues and the organs of the body. Materials are being exchanged, then the blood or the hemolymph finds its way back into the heart. So we call these the open circulatory system. We find such in organisms such as the arthropods. Examples of arthropods include the cockroaches, the ants, the butterfly, and so on. Insects. Then looking at the closed circulatory system, we say it is closed, it is enclosed, encompassed. So talking about the closed circulatory system is a type of circulatory system in which the transport media now flows in confined vessels and does not come in direct contact with the tissues and organs of the body. This can be found in organisms such as the mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and the pisces, which we refer to as fishes. So closed circulatory system is further divided into two again. We have the double circulatory system and the single circulatory system. Looking at the single circulatory system, the blood flows through the chambers of the heart once in a complete circuit. The blood flows through the chambers of the transport, sorry, I'm missing one particular word there. Because I don't want to use the heart. It's for fish. The fish does not have heart. So looking at the single circulatory system, the blood flows through the pumping device once in a complete circuit. That is, it only passes through the chambers once. You have this in the fish. But talking about the double circulatory system, the blood flows through the chambers of the heart twice in a complete circuit. As we can see in the structure in front of us, we have the chambers of the heart are two. Are four, where we have the left chambers and the right chambers. So here when you have the blood coming in through the right atrium, it enters into the ventricles and it goes out through the pulmonary artery and goes to the lungs. It gets there, it gets oxygenated, then it comes back to the heart through the pulmonary veins. When it gets into the heart, it enters into the left atria, then goes into the left ventricle. From the left ventricles, it now passes through the aorta and goes into the entire circulation, where you have the rest of the body taking up the oxygen, taking up the food substances, and the blood flows back to the heart. If we look at that, the blood passes through the heart in one circulation. It passes through the heart twice. So double circulatory system is then divided into two, where you have the pulmonary circulatory system and the systemic. Please take note, it's not systematic, it is systemic circulation. So for the pulmonary circulation, as we can see, it's a circulation involving the chambers of the heart, or the structure of the heart, and the lungs. So we can define it as the circulation which involves the flow of the blood from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. Pulmonary circulation is a circulation which involves the flow of blood from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. While systemic circulation is a circulation which involves the movement or the flow of the blood from the heart to the rest of the body, excluding the lungs, and back to the heart. I repeat, it's the flow of blood from the heart to the rest of the body, excluding, or you can say except, the lungs, and back to the body. So looking at this, we have the advantage of the pulmonary circulatory system. It allows the blood entering the lungs to go at a low pressure and ensures the blood to be well oxygenated before it leaves the lungs. Then on leaving the lung, the blood leaves the heart for the systemic circulation at a high pressure, because of what? The chambers of the heart and the ventricle are very thick, then is distributed at a faster rate. Here we look at the position of the heart in between the lungs and the thoracic cavity. So now we look at the pulse. The pulse are the regular beating which is caused by the depression in the arteries due to the pumping of the blood, which we always feel in the arteries. So here we tend to use it to monitor the heart rate or the blood pressure. So at this stage, we tend to bring a close to the class for today. In our other lessons, we'll be looking at other parts of the circulatory system. Till the next class, I remain Adenuga Ajibola. Thank you and God bless.
Hello viewers, these are key messages from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education on the coronavirus. Dear parents, keep children at home at all times. Avoid sending children to shops and markets. Do not engage children in petty trading on the streets and garages. Allow children to play within the confines of the home. Limit visitors into your homes. Adhere to COVID-19 health precautions and guidelines. Schools are closed, but learning continues. Dear teachers, you are encouraged to desist from all forms of group activities involving students. All school premises should remain closed and not to be used for any other purpose. Thank you.